Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex or Nuzz here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about gearing in RuneScape 3 and progression. Now, I've been asked many times, more than I can count, to make gearing guides for the different combat styles, talk about the order of priority to upgrade your gear in, and while I've considered it, there's already some great guides out there and great resources. What I thought I'd do instead is talk about some tips for gear progression and little tidbits that I really wish I knew much sooner when it comes to PVMing and gearing that can really help you out so you don't make any of the same dumb mistakes that I did or sometimes still do. I also want to mention just at the start here, I've had some new emojis made and a bunch of new things made for my channel membership since this is my full-time job now. If you guys want to support the channel and get some cool stuff like different emojis, badges next to your name, members only live streams, shoutouts at the end of videos coming soon, a special Discord rank, and even merchandise on some of the tiers, if you guys want to do that, you can click the join button below or you can visit the link in the description. It just helps me out and is another way of supporting my channel. Again, totally optional, but I just retrofitted the whole thing, so thought I'd mention it here, but let's get back to the real purpose of this video. So we all know just how complex PVM can be, and gearing's no exception. There's just so many tiers. There's like tiers 1 to 95 in gear. There's different slots for your equipment. Not only do you have all your equipment and weapons, you now have perks, abilities, unlocks, passives. It can get just super overwhelming, especially if you're not super into PVM or you're just coming back, or even if you're experienced as a PVMer like me, it can still get overwhelming sometimes. Well, the first tip I want to give you is for gear progression is just don't sell your gear. Now, I know it sounds simple, and I'm a big offender here, but once you buy gear and you spend money perking it out, if it's, you know, a top tier piece of gear like tier 90-ish, just keep it. You invest money into it on top of the money you spent buying it with the perks, and while it might be tempting, very tempting actually, to sell it and buy different gear, this is just going to be a never-ending cycle of dumping your gear for a new piece of gear, getting bored of that, and doing it over and over again, and that's something I am probably the most guilty of and has probably lost me millions or maybe hundreds of millions of GP. So make sure once you buy your gear, with small exceptions, that you try to keep it for the long term on your account. However, if for some reason you really do need to sell a piece of gear, make sure at least you level that gear up to level 15 and you use something called an equipment separator on it so you can keep your gear and keep the perk, so you get the perks back that you can use on future gear. Of course, if the perks are really cheap, you don't need to do this, but in general, if you're selling some gear with some decent perks, just do yourself a favor and spend the extra time leveling it up and making this separator so you can save yourself those nice perks. Now, the next tip might be a little bit controversial. I don't think it really should be, but I really, think it can help a lot of you out if you don't take it too far. So we know there's an optimal order to buy PVM upgrades. The PVME Discord does a fantastic job of showing you the optimal order to get your upgrades for each style. Now, I'm going to link that below, and you should definitely take a look at it, at all the different setups and the optimal orders. However, I would say do not feel like you always have to go for the exact optimal order. I'm going to give you an example. So I ended up buying an SGB earlier than some other upgrades. Now, for me, this actually worked very well because the bosses I was camping and just loved doing were susceptible to SGB, like Archglacior and Raksha in particular, and ended up making me a ton of money. This meant I was getting so much use out of my SGB. However, if you're somebody that isn't planning to do much of the bosses that SGB works on, it might not benefit you as much as someone like me to buy it right away or sooner. So if you're deciding between like buying an SGB or a Greater Ricochet first, or like SGB and an Eldritch Crossbow, technically you should buy an SGB before you buy an Eldritch Crossbow, but if you're not going to do any of the bosses that SGB works on, maybe the Eldritch Crossbow would be better in your situation. Your situation is what matters the most. Maybe buying something else is a little less optimal, but in your case, it might get much more use. So the PVME upgrade order is a fantastic baseline to look at what things are ordered in what priority, but you don't have to follow it to an exact T. Sure, it might be the most optimal, but go with what fits your situation best. Of course, you don't want to go and get like a tier 92 weapon, but not have like Corruption Shot or Cinderbane gloves or something basic to that extreme, but you don't have to go in the exact perfect order every time. So we all know gear is very important. That's the topic of this video, gear and weapons, but you can actually do something to your gear and weapons, which is perking it out. And a lot of people don't know just how important that is. Ancient Invention is insanely overpowered. I think the DPS you have on a weapon based on, not having it perked versus having it perked with Ancient Invention, which is basic perks, is like a 7% DPM increase, which is absolutely insane. And not only are there perks for your weapons and armor, there's also perks that you can switch to. I know a lot of us don't like Switchscape, which is fine. You don't have to do it, but there's stuff like Planted Feet if you don't want to get the upgraded Death Swiftness and Sunshine, which is also something you can buy to get that Planted Feet built in. There's stuff like flanking switches, which can be very useful. Things like chroming, which is nice for buffing up Greater Ricochet even more. Perks are very, very important. If you buy Greater Ricochet, but you don't get chroming 4, it's not going to be nearly as powerful. So there's a lot of small things that synergize with your gear and your weapons that make it more powerful than it's meant to be. I saw somebody comment on my video that they've never hit over a 5,000 in combat, but they have like tier 92s, and I didn't really know what to say to that. I mean, I don't know their position or what's happening with, their gear and everything, but having something that big, you should definitely be hitting pretty high. So there's different small little things that can make such a world of difference, such as using the right aura, using the right familiar, using the right potions, using the right abilities. I know there's a ton of stuff, the right pocket slot item. There's just so much. I do have an ultimate PVM guide that I have it's like an hour and a half of compilation of a bunch of the stuff I've learned in PVM, some of the videos I made with Invention and stuff like that. So I'll leave that in the description as well if you guys might want to check that out to just get, because I know there's just so much stuff and I of course can't cover it in this video, don't want to repeat it all, but make sure you synergize everything well too. Like sometimes you can just be missing something really simple that isn't, a weapon or armor piece that can really turn around your DPS and your whole PVM journey. Lastly is something that again people tend to sleep on, and that's how important quest rewards, minigame rewards, and sort of unlockables are compared to buyable things. Sometimes unlockable free upgrades per se are gonna be better than a lot of stuff you can buy, a lot of gear you can buy. For instance, you have things like the Spirit Cape passive from Dungeoneering, which buffs your summoning familiar spec, so you spend less money. You have things like the Skill Cape stand in Anachronia, which lets you get an extra Skill Cape perk. You have an insane spell like Disruption Shield that is very powerful in a ton of PVM scenarios and is going to make much more of a difference than upgrading a slight tier of gear or buying one thing. You have the new spell book that's unlocked that gives you insanely OP spells like Animate Dead. There's just a ton of upgrades that aren't related to like your armor or anything that are pretty much free, and I'll link a video again in the description that talks about these. There's one more thing I want to talk about that I just thought of that's actually really useful, is that sometimes you can get budget items or budget armor, budget equipment, budget weapons that actually do pretty close to as good as the higher level stuff. So just as an example, you can get a superior Zuriel staff that's a tier 88 magic weapon. I think it'll maybe cost you around 25 to 30 mil, could be a little bit more now, but compared to a Noxious staff, this is just 2 tiers lower but significantly cheaper. So you could buy this and basically spend like 30 mil and save like 100 mil to put into other facets of your gear, of your skills. So sometimes it might feel tempting to buy that super high tier weapon, but there's a lot of budget options that you can look at that can save you a ton of money, and you can allocate that money somewhere else. It's important to budget your money, right? None of us have hundreds of billions of GP. I mean, I'm sure there's some people, but a lot of us have to kind of pick and choose what we upgrade next. We're not just going to go and buy all the gear in the game instantly. So doing budget options can help you kind of allocate money towards more things or get, a wider range of things rather than putting it all into one item. So look at budget gear. I actually have a video right here on the screen that you can look at a bunch of budget options for PVM that might be able to really help you out. about and stuff that's kind of underrated. So you guys can look at that. And then above that, I actually have an underrated unlock guide, which has a lot of underrated weapons and armor and things that you might not think of that are kind of underrated that are really, really good. So make sure you check those two out. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope this video helped you out, and I will see you guys in the next one.